Hey everyone, it's Rob, and thanks for listening in today. I greatly appreciate your time. Wow, what a year. As co CEO of Image One, I've never experienced a year like this in all of the 29 we've been in business. Thanks to all of you for your support. If you haven't added your name to our email list, please do so. You can do that at donothingbook.com. And if you're a regular listener, you know we have had many important conversations this year with some amazing people. So if you're inspired, please share the podcast with your friends, coworkers, and people within your network. And to bring some perspective, my guest today will share how he and his team are leading with genuine care to address the challenge of homelessness in our country. You'll get a deeper understanding of what it means to be homeless and why it happens to people. Daniel Roby serves as CEO for Austin Street Center. Austin Street Center is the largest free emergency homeless shelter in the city of Dallas and is the only area emergency shelter that focuses on the older homeless population. In 2016, Daniel was appointed by Mayor Mike Rawlings to participate in the City of Dallas's Commission on Homelessness. This commission is tasked with analyzing the community's current system for addressing homelessness, comparing it to best practices of similar communities, and delivering a focused set of strategies and recommendations for the city and Dallas County to consider going forward. Daniel currently serves on the board of directors for the Metro Dallas Homeless Alliance. Under Daniel's leadership, Austin Street has doubled the size of case management and staff, and more programs and services have been added to help individuals successfully end their homelessness. Daniel received the Nonprofit CEO of the Year Award in November of 2017 and was selected in January of 2018 as a recipient for the Dallas Business Journal's 40 Under 40 Award, which honors the top 40 North Texas men and women in business under the age of 40. You are going to love this conversation. So please enjoy my chat with Daniel. Hey, Daniel, thank you for joining me today. I'm so happy to see you again.
It's so good to see you. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. My pleasure. The work you all do at Austin Street Center in Dallas is amazing. Can you share a little bit about what you guys are up to there?
Well, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. I love getting a chance to do what I do and support the people that Austin Street Center supports. For the past, 38 years, we've been providing safe shelter and meeting the basic needs of the most vulnerable homeless here in Dallas, and really working to find a permanent solution, and a real end to their homeless experience, and just trying to help people find a home. So
absolutely great. And on your website, you have this video, and at the end of the video, a woman whose name I believe is Donna Lloyd says, "And that's my story." And that just gives me chills. Can you share a little bit about what that means and why that's so impactful, that statement?
Well, I love Donna, but I'll tell you that every person that finds themselves without a home didn't anticipate that their life would end up in that circumstance. And so Donna speaks very well, very accurately about the fact that there's much more to every person's life besides their homeless experience, and that homeless experience doesn't define who they are. I think I've mentioned this before, but we don't refer to people typically about their housing dwelling. I don't call somebody, an apartment dweller or a two-story homeowner or a mansion, dweller. But if someone doesn't have a home, we call them homeless as if that's who they are. And for Donna, I think what she's saying is, hey, let me tell you who I was before I was homeless. And let me tell you all the obstacles I had along the way. And let me tell you where I am now and where I'm going. And that is my story. And so I love how she shares that.
Yeah. And when we spoke prior to this recording, um, I learned something very quickly about that statement. I said a homeless person, and what I learned from you was it's a person who happens to be homeless. And so thank you for that clarification. It was very meaningful to me, and I hope to others as well that think of it in those terms. What is a common misconception about a person that finds themselves homeless?
Well, I think one common misconception is that people who are homeless are typically addicted to drugs or alcohol. Studies, national as well as local, are going to say that that statistic is probably in the ballpark of 30 to 35% of people who are homeless are struggling with an addiction or substance use of some kind. And even in those circumstances, oftentimes we find that those came about as a means of coping or dealing with their homelessness rather than were the cause of their homeless experience. And so I think it's important to know that oftentimes it's easy to say, gosh, this person is in their circumstance and they probably made poor decisions that resulted in their homelessness. And sometimes that may be the case. But a lot of times too, I think I find that when I hear somebody's story, I realize, it's hard for me to say what decisions I would have made or wouldn't have made if I had been through all that this person had been through. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the things I've learned in my 15 years of doing this.
You mentioned to me this formula. I'm wondering if you can explain that a little bit.
Sure. At Austin Street Center, we say that financial need or poverty of some kind, plus some type of a crisis, COVID-19 is a great example of that, minus social support, could be family support or otherwise, is what equals homelessness. So financial need plus a crisis minus social support is what makes homelessness. A lot of people struggle day to day, but they maintain a roof over their head. They have strong social support. For whatever reason, they're able to avoid one crisis or another. Other people are in circumstances where, social support is not strong, but their income stream is strong, right? And once again, they're able to avoid those crises. We also have situations where the crisis gets so big, it doesn't matter how strong your social support is. It doesn't matter what income stream you have. If you have a hurricane, if you have other things that happen, everyone kind of finds themselves, without a home. So, those things, that equation can be adjusted based upon the crisis and based upon the financial need. But yes, typically that equation does prove out to be true. Financial need plus a crisis minus social support is what makes people come into a homeless.
During COVID, how did you all have to adjust your operations, and how have you been dealing with this, awfully unique circumstance?
That's probably a podcast in and of itself. Yeah. And I know, it is for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I'll say this. People who are facing homelessness while they're facing COVID-19, obviously they can't shelter in place, because there is no home to shelter in place for. Social distancing is extremely challenging if you're in a shelter environment, or if you're accessing any kind of social services of any kind. And so, and plus, people who are homeless, they're twice as likely to be hospitalized if they get COVID-19. They're 2 to 3 times as likely to die if they get COVID-19. They're 2 to 4 times as likely to need critical care if they get COVID-19. So it is a significant challenge, for these individuals. And a third of Austin Street Center clients are already at high risk, due to age factors, other medical issues. It's not common to have lots of, health conditions like hypertension, diabetes, things that would otherwise put somebody at risk. And so, we had to do a lot on the front end here at Austin Street. We, not only at some times would reduce and other times completely eliminate volunteerism. We also made big adjustments to any group activities, whether that was, AA meetings or NA meetings or veteran support group meetings, or any kind of religious activities, sometimes eliminating altogether. Sometimes trying to figure out ways to make those virtual. No matter what we did, we had to make sure we didn't deviate from our mission to make sure that people had a permanent place to call home, because we knew that the safest place for everyone to be was to be in a home of their own. Which is why I'm so just honored to say that even this last month in October, we helped 30 people transition, out of homelessness and into their own place. And so we're really trying to maintain that part of our work, even while we've had to do things like increase spacing between beds, which means we've had to decrease the number of beds in our emergency shelter, and completely pivot our entire operations from what was really an overnight shelter primarily to a 24/7 operation where everyone stayed in the building during the day and on our campus here. And so big adjustments to schedules, job descriptions, and otherwise, and bringing medical staff on board. But I think it's really helped us to navigate this crisis as good as can be expected.
Right. Has it been a challenge at all for somebody who would normally come to the facility and spend the night and then is accustomed to leaving, now having to stay? Has that presented any challenges for you all?
Yes, it has. And I will say that there has been a lot of education that we do on the front end, a lot of conversation and dialogue, across the board in the emergency shelter system, nationally, and, definitely here in Dallas. There's a lot of people that are in need, perhaps more than ever before. And so, there's a lot of people coming to us for help. And so we have to have a conversation that says, hey, if this is the best intervention for you, if emergency shelter is what you need, let's have that conversation on what that looks like. At the same time, I've been so impressed by the grit, by the determination, by the resilience of those coming to us for help, and how they've shown real, just extraordinary capability to deal with these difficult circumstances, and how that's helped them along the journey to transition out and into their own place.
I wondered. I was thinking if I found myself homeless and on the street, living on the street, would I understand initially what was happening in the world with the pandemic? So in other words, is somebody tuned in to the day-to-day, like worldwide crises that are happening, and can they completely sort of sink in to what precautions need to take place for somebody who is finding themselves in that situation?
I hope I don't sound too repetitive here, but I'll say that every person is really in a different situation there. I'll give you some examples. If someone is experiencing homelessness for the first time, right? Sometimes for them to come into an environment like ours, it's quite a shock, right? Most people, like I said, never intended or thought that they would be in this circumstance. And so maybe not at first, right? Because they're trying to take in everything. They're dealing with the COVID crisis, but really first they're dealing with a housing crisis. And they may also be dealing with other crises as well. Are they also dealing with a mental health crisis? Are they also dealing with financial crisis? What other crises are they going through? And so they kind of have to take these things one thing at a time. At the same time, I will say a lot of our clients have also proven to be highly educated and very informative in terms of responding to the needs that exist, into keeping up to date with the most recent recommendations and protocols. We here have a regular town hall where we gather all of our clients together and all go over our policies and procedures and kind of things that may be coming down the pipeline in terms of changes or recommendations, and how we're adapting to that and answer questions. And I've been very impressed with how informed people are. So I think it's kind of a case-by-case basis.
Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about how the community in Dallas has come together during this time.
It has been amazing. Both from a from a funding perspective, I can say immediately the foundations came together and they did things like created a uniform application. So literally, you could submit an application that was one application that automatically went to dozens of foundations for them to be able to respond to who had need, that was doing direct care, for people that was in response to COVID-19. That kind of thinking is huge, because when you're trying to respond to a crisis and then also trying to figure out how do I fund my response to crisis, and having to do 100 different applications that are each different, that would be challenging in of itself administratively. From a practical standpoint too, I can tell you that the community has also come together on the service side of things. So like whether it's response to inclement weather, like all the different leaders of all the different homeless service providers, were immediately talking together every single day. In fact, we started an 8 o'clock call that was literally a daily call where every leader from every different organization that was serving, providing emergency shelter, we'd get together and say, okay, what's new? What did you learn yesterday that you didn't know the day before? And how can we learn from each other and adapt together? And who needs to take what piece of this pie, so that we make sure that that all of our communities are safe and that we remain effective in trying to address the homeless crisis along with COVID-19.
And if you may not have insight on this, but are other communities and other parts of the U.S. coming together in that way?
I've heard anecdotally that they are. I think every community is different in terms of how they're structured and what their governance looks like. I think Dallas is a bit unique in terms of, just the relationships that are built on the nonprofit level and the level of leadership that I think that exists there. But I do get the sense that, everyone's kind of got that, hey, we all have to come together during times of significant need. And so regardless of what their position is or authority is, you get that same sense, even if they may be structured differently.
Is there a community that you look to? And I know, and you should be extremely proud of what you all are doing, but is there another community that you look to and say, they're handling this really well?
Well, I think what we've done in Dallas, what we kind of had the opportunity to do, was just to see who is dealing with the crisis first. And so, we learned a lot from Seattle. We learned a lot from New York. We learned a lot from Georgia. And a lot of those things were just because, the COVID crisis hit their communities and their homeless populations before it hit Dallas's community and Dallas's homeless population. So, and certainly there are things about their system that we can learn, in terms of, how our system operates and theirs. There are things unique to each community, that wouldn't translate as well, but I think we've been able to learn a lot from those communities because, they had to adapt before we did. And of course, it's been helpful to have some national organizations, National Alliance to End Homelessness, National Healthcare for the Homeless Council, and other organizations that help kind of bring together some of these lessons learned in these communities and kind of push them out nationally, so that all communities, every major city, every county is able to be educated on what we're learning.
Mm-hmm. You talk about this perfect storm that could be on the way. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think what we're concerned about here, what we talk a lot about, is that there is, essentially it's kind of a triple threat for us because we feel like we're on the heels of inclement weather, and people don't think of inclement weather in Texas, but the reality is in Dallas, what you get is you get real spotty inclement weather. So it doesn't last very long, but it comes quickly and then it goes. And so you can't anticipate or expect when it's going to come. And we have people that die every year on the streets due to inclement weather. So we're concerned about that. And whenever it happens, we'll always have hundreds of people. We estimate between 600 and 1,000 people that seek shelter during inclement weather that don't typically seek shelter. So we've got inclement weather, we've got COVID-19, and all the safety concerns around that. And then we also have just the general economy and the eviction concern. It's estimated in Texas between 2.6 and 3.7 million people may be evicted by the end of the year if things don't change. So there's been a lot of great work on the local level. I can say Dallas has done a really good job to try to stem those issues. A lot of the broad brushstrokes that CDC and others have done have been less effective than the local efforts. But I think, the concern is, especially come January, what's going to happen then? And so we've got these three issues coming at us essentially all at the same time. I can tell you, typically we've had churches that said, hey, during inclement weather, we'll open our doors. Now all those churches are saying, because of COVID, we can't do that. Okay, well, what does that mean for the 100 people that would typically go to this church during inclement weather and now cannot? And so we're trying to secure resources to purchase hotel rooms and see if individuals can move into hotels. And now some of those hotels are saying, well, when COVID first hit, we were doing that, and now we're not, based upon what our hotel association is saying. So, there's a constant evolution to stay on top of that is challenging.
Wow. Okay, I have a kind of a set of questions that I asked some people. What are you curious about? And some may seem naive, so my apologies in advance. But these are things that people are curious about, or maybe have some misconceptions about. The first is there a typical demographic that someone who is homeless has?
I think that's a good question, because I think when you say the word homeless, immediately a picture comes to mind. For most people, and again, this is a bias or assumption, most people, when I say the word homeless, picture that person in your mind, they're going to think of a middle-aged man who is addicted. We were kind of talking about that earlier.
Right.
That's not actually, the demographics that we see, because 40% of people who are homeless are women. Okay, that's a pretty large, population that's right there. We also see that the numbers are changing. We're seeing more women become homeless now since COVID-19 came to us than we were seeing before. Right, so we're seeing that change as well. And I think too, we also don't realize just we mentioned, addiction earlier. About half of people who are homeless have mental health, concerns here at Austin Street Center. There's also the thing too about panhandling. A lot of people, will picture somebody because that's who they see driving by. Most people who experience homelessness don't ever ask anybody for money. And of course, not everyone who asks for money is actually experiencing homelessness. So, you have to think of what I see is not necessarily what the reality is, and kind of sift through that. Not that person may not have need, right? They may be experiencing financial need, to our point earlier, but they may not be, without a home.
Mm-hmm. So, and you mentioned one of the questions was about mental illness and what percentage. So it's about 50%. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, so at Austin Street, the number is about 50%. It can change from area to area. I think the number is 47% right now within our community. Those numbers, I say they've changed over time because, like in the 1980s, when the mental health institutions were really being shut down, we saw the streets became flooded with people because the idea of community support for people with mental illness was it was an ideological thing that we were going to have these community supports, and those were never adequately funded. Right now, the largest provider for mental health services in Dallas and in a lot of communities is the local jail. And that really shouldn't be the case, but it is true. Mm-hmm. And so we have a lot of people that are in and out of jail, that are, people that are on the streets for reasons of they're not able to adequately care for themselves. And so, yeah, there definitely is. Mental health is a large contributor, but it's not everybody. And there's also situational mental health issues like depression, anxiety, things that people have as a result of their homeless situation.
Yeah. How do you uncover that? In other words, how do you uncover that there's a mental health issue?
Well, yeah. So at Austin Street, what we do is, when somebody comes into us for the first time, we spend about 45 minutes really getting to know the people that come to us. And, we do ask for some self-disclosure. Obviously, people don't have to disclose whether or not they have a diagnosis or don't have a diagnosis. We do have a mental health agency on site. We have a partnership with IPS Services that has a psychiatrist that comes on site, a qualified mental health care professional that's here for 35 hours a week to be able to make sure that people have access to their medications, as well as somebody to talk to. And then that provider continues with them even after they transition to their own home, so that the care isn't just provided for them in shelter, but that they continue to progress and do better even after they move into the next place.
Do some people who are homeless want to be homeless?
I am so glad that you asked that question, because it's a question that I get a lot, and it's something that I think is important to address. In 15 years of doing this directly, I can't think of, and that a few thousand people a year that we serve, think of more than a handful of people that I've met that I would say really want to be in this circumstance. I could, count on, my fingers and toes. And I say that because that doesn't mean that there are a lot of people that are resistant, right? And people may be resistant for legitimate reasons, right? So if you are struggling with an addiction and you said, hey, I can't come into shelter because I'm still working on my addiction, and I know that I can't bring the bottle into the shelter environment. Okay, that may be a legitimate reason why we can't have, drugs and alcohol in the building. And at the same time, that individual, still doesn't want to be in their circumstance. Mm-hmm. Other similar issues where people, have a, romantic partner, and they don't want to be homeless, but they're not willing to separate from their romantic partner. Are there enough opportunities for those partners to be together, or are men and women separated? So there's the shelter environment, and then there's being housed, which is why, at Austin Street, we have our shelter environment. And then we also have housing programs that don't require shelter. So you don't have to go through the shelter environment in order to access housing. Mm-hmm. So we'll work with people even if they are not, if they're not set up through the shelter.
Do you feel that in your experience, most people who are finding themselves homeless want help?
I almost never find somebody who doesn't want help. And even in those circumstances, typically what I come across is people who may be struggling with a mental illness, and they still want help, but they're struggling to articulate their circumstance. Mm-hmm. They're struggling to advocate for themselves. And they may be able to say, I don't like my circumstances, but they may not be able to say, okay, now I know exactly, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're able to go out and go through a process, give them a bus ticket, and they're going to go get their ID. They may need more help than that. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of the things that we run into.
If there was a magic wand that could help all people who have found themselves to be homeless, what would that be? I mean, is there a solution that for somebody who's leading with such genuine care like you are, where you say, if we would just do this or a couple of these things, it would be such a game changer?
Magic wands. They are hard to come by. But I will say this. The end solution for everybody who is experiencing homelessness is a home, right? And I did this work for years without being able to make that connection. I worked with an agency once that was amazing with addiction treatment. They were literally the best. And I learned so much about how to help people that are in their addiction through working with this organization. And sometimes we would go through a year and a half of treatment with people, and we would go through childhood traumas and all these, coping behaviors, and people would get their GED and all these things. And then at the end of this program, I was work with people on their exit, and they would be brought to me and say, okay, Johnny's done amazing. He's been in this program forever. He's ready for an exit. He's going to graduate, in a month, in 2 months, whatever. And I was always shocked by the reality of he's been here for a year and a half, and technically he's still kind of homeless. He's still, he's done such great work to engage his mind, to engage his body, right, to engage his mental health, but he still needs a home. And so I think making sure that access to a home is affordable, to make sure that the community support is there, whether that's family or whether that's a religious community, or whether it's some other social support. All those things are going to be needed for someone to be able to be effective.
Mm-hmm. When sometimes when I've traveled pre-COVID, in some cities, I would see sort of like little cities popping up with tents and underpasses and things of that nature. Can you talk a little bit about that? Is that a good thing or not a good thing? Are there homeless people? Are there people who are homeless in there? Is that what's going on? And should that be illegal?
Homeless encampments. They are a very popular topic because a lot of people are frustrated by the reality that people are homeless often so close to their residence. And so this is when you get into a lot of not in my backyard kind of a conversation. It's difficult because it's easy to think, well, can't they just go someplace else? Why, if you're here and like I pay taxes, this is my residence, why is this allowed to exist essentially, right in my community? And, hey, I can understand those emotions, those feelings. I've got, 4 kids, and I've got, if there was a homeless encampment, next to my home, I would be concerned. Especially the larger homeless encampments grow, the more criminal activity typically, happens there. But I think what we need to do as we look at homeless encampments is recognize these are unsheltered individuals. And so try to get at why people are there. There definitely is, to my reference earlier, a need to make sure that we don't allow for unsheltered encampments to just kind of grow and take over. But the answer, frankly, is not just to shut them down, because I can tell you, you can utilize and waste a lot of resources by trying to control people, when ultimately we have to realize that we don't control anybody. Because, you can fence off one area and people just move across the street. And it's a game of whack-a-mole that has no end to it. And essentially, you're just trying to say, move people, just 6 feet farther, just 6 feet farther, just 6 feet farther until people are away from me. And that's not a mindset that I think reflects who we want to be as human beings, who we want to be as people. And I think we need to do a good look at ourselves to say, what kind of city do we want to be? What kind of state do we want to be? What kind of nation do we want to be? And hopefully that's not it.
Yeah, I love that. If you see somebody who has become homeless, and let's just say you're in a city and you're walking by and there's a person or a few people sitting there that appear to be homeless, is there something you can do? I know so many people, they want to do something. They want to, oftentimes give some money. What is the best thing to do?
Well, I'll say this. If you're looking for something to give, there's always something to give. I always feel like the most valuable thing you can give can be human kindness. So at minimum, you can provide a smile, an acknowledgement of somebody else's existence. I can tell you how isolating and lonely it can be if you are actually homeless and the person who is on the side of the street, with a sign out saying, can you help? And how many people are typically trying to avoid you, or how many people, walk to the other side of the street, because you don't look right or you don't smell right or you don't whatever. And so just the acknowledgement that, hey, you're a person and you matter is a huge thing. Beyond that, I would say if you are trying to meet someone's critical need, if you are in any place that ever has, weather of any kind to be concerned about, or even if you don't, typically the thing that people could utilize the most, it's given the least, a pair of just regular old dry socks or something that is highly utilized and, is something that's easy to carry around in your car. If you're in a hot area, a bottle of water would be helpful. So those things are easy to give away. I'm always try to recognize that, if you're doing any large feedings or something like that, to be aware of the trash that you may be leaving behind in a community. So when we're talking about, the impact to neighbors in the area, that's something I try to keep in mind. But, for me, I've been doing this for a long time. And so, I build relationships. I'll invite someone to my car and I'll take them to, Subway, and we'll hang out and spend time together. That's not safe for every person in every environment. And so I get that. But at least a smile and a wave can go a long way. And I've heard stories of people who said, I didn't believe that I could, that I was ready to make any changes. And this person was kind to me. And I said, okay, I'm ready to give this a shot. And that was the beginning of change for them. So, and then a resource. If you have a resource booklet in your area, make sure to give that out as well.
That's so great. Kindness. It's just another human that's right in front of you. So let's not lose sight of that. Daniel, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And to all the loyal listeners of the Leading with Genuine Care podcast, I greatly appreciate you spending time with us today. And as always, I wish you all much love and gratitude.